Hello everybody and welcome to Astrology, just touching base, and we're going to talk about comets in astrology based on an article I wrote on my Substack channel. And I just wanted to let everyone know to, if you can, for those interested, please send me your dates of birth and times. You can DM me because of my annual Year of the Horse thing coming up, which I'll probably do around Feb next year, but I'm just putting it out there early. And I'll do a live on YouTube and on my Substack, and obviously there'll be an article coming up on the year on my Substack channel as well. So we'll look into the Chinese astrological side of things, and of course this will be a personal take, not so much of a collective one. So that's why I'm asking for people's date of birth, because when you actually know how the Year of the Horse, Yang Fire Horse, the stems and branches interact with your personal 4 pillars charts, just makes it more interesting. So yes, and hope everyone's dealing well with the Mercury retrograde going on. It is actually very interesting because this particular retrograde, mine falls into the 7th house, and it's fascinating because I have actually had so many people from the past contact me, that being clients or previous friends, and just people I haven't seen for a long time, get in touch with me again, which has been really, really interesting. So it's amazing how sometimes with the placements of where Mercury retrograde is and how it plays out for you personally, how it brings people back, especially in the 7th house where mine is at the moment. Anyway, so let's just look into this, because comets have fascinated me for a long time, probably from more, I guess, my own personal research into the cosmos and paranormal, and just a lot of things I've read over the years. Some pretty wide reader, so I've got a pretty intuitive sense of how things kind of play out. But and obviously my understanding of astrology and my interest in astrology has, as a practitioner of astrology, I find comets, particularly in mundane astrology, right, really affect the collective and the world, right? Obviously. So yeah, and the ancient astrologers always looked at comets quite seriously. Like, they didn't have this new age spin on it, like it's, warm and fluffy and, the ETs are coming to save us or anything like this, right? They always considered comets an ill omen. So, and at times their appearances are usually being followed by great calamities or disease in some form or another, right? And usually the astrological sign they appear in on a mundane level will affect the events associated with it, right? And we've got to remember too, certain signs rule parts of the world. Signs govern countries. For instance, I'm in Australia, right? So we're ruled by Sagittarius, and it does kind of have a Capricorn influence as well. But primarily it's a Sagittarian country because of the space, right, we have here. There's an abundance of space, which is really that Jupiterian energy, expansive, a lot of space. And so the ancient mundane astrologers would say that when the comets appear, right, like I said, it's usually an ill omen, followed by, and this is observations, but clearly this is documented facts, obviously, after things have happened, right? So there's been famines, pestilence, droughts, floods, bloodshed, wars, fevers, epidemics, earthquakes, tidal waves, plagues, death of kings and prominent people. There can be increase in crime, poverty, unusual sadness among people, dangers to women, derangement of the system. I can't really get more deranged than what it is at the moment. And treacherous winds and hurricanes, just to name a few. And there's a whole other list of other things, but this is just generally speaking But and usually, like, there's thousands of comets, right? Astronomers observe, and the brighter they are, the more impact they usually have on the planet, according to astrology, right? And especially if things are really visual from wherever you are in the world. But what I find interesting about comets, and there's this really old book I have, it was hidden in the vaults, and I was going through some stuff the other day, and I found a book by an Australian astronomer called Fred Hoyle, who wrote a book called Diseases from Space. And according to his research, right, microbes stored deep and frozen in comets, he would say, since the early history, and when they enter our solar system, so to speak, they can bring like bacteria or viruses that tend to give off illness that we haven't experienced before on the planet, because obviously our bodies, our constitution, so to speak, are quite used to it, right? So, a lot of these kind of comets that have come out have always given either plagues, epidemics, or famines, disease. They usually bring this into our atmosphere, right? And it was interesting, just before the so-called pandemic, right? In 2019, right, there was a meteor that was spotted in China that was really bright, really bright as a fireball, so to speak, in the atmosphere in northeast China. And of course, after that, what happened? I mean, this is quite a deep subject, so I urge you guys, if you're interested in this research, then it is definitely worth looking into, because I think there is something to it. I don't want to get into that whole thing about the whatever that we experienced the last 5 years, because I got my personal views on that. But it's just interesting to note the observations that have happened around the world, and with comets and meteors and things like this. So this is what happened in China in 2019. And also, plagues and epidemics do have a strange phenomena. And usually before breakouts, such as pandemics and things like this, and plagues. And there's a very good book by a guy called William Bramley, who wrote the book The Gods of Eden, who was a war historian, and he did a lot of research into this, that the strange fogs followed by extraterrestrial sightings. Usually throughout history, there's always been extraterrestrial sightings before plagues and epidemics. And this book is absolutely fascinating, and I urge everyone to read that who want to look into these kind of things. This, if you want to call it paranormal, but this is historical facts. This guy's research, he didn't intentionally go looking for this kind of things, but these were the conclusions he's come up with his research into plagues over the years. And I guess one of the main comets we all really kind of are familiar with is Halley's Comet. And ever since then, there was a time when there was eruptions and calamities after this, particularly in the year 1909 and 1910. I think Halley's Comet comes around every 75 to 80 years. And at that time, in 1909 and 1910, there was a death of King Edward of England that happened days after the appearance, as well as there was a revolution in Portugal as well. And there was a few other events. I'm just going off this at the top of my head. So at that time, and so it's always interesting to pay attention to these things. So I don't think things are all so-called doom and gloom, but because when I looked into the 3-eye atlas that was discovered this year on the 1st of the 7th, 2025, they were basically saying, from what I was reading, that this comet doesn't kind of behave like normal comets. And so comets, like planets in astrology, are really a reflection of ourselves on so many levels, how they're operating. So, they're going to stir up what's going on within, in our subconscious, unconscious, the collective unconscious, so to speak. And so one thing I will say about comets not behaving in the normal kind of, I guess, way, or orbiting the kind of usual ways they do, then it's just a reflection of how abnormal people have so-called become on the planet. And it's pretty obvious to see that in terms of people's psychological, spiritual, and really we're living in a so-called age that really doesn't respect these kind of things, right? Where our psyches have become more and more deranged, with people really refusing to acknowledge the shadow side of the psyche and usually run from it. And it's like the runner energy, the Seven of Swords in the tarot. They don't want to face their own shadows, so they run. And so what's interesting to note here is, which I was really trying to look and see what sign the comet was actually playing out through. And of course, I found out that it was expressing itself through the sign of Sagittarius, which is a mutable fire sign. So comets in fire signs usually bring war, hot weather, fire, and quarrels. And it's interesting, next year, right, we're coming into a yang fire horse year. And in Chinese astrology, that's a pure fire pillar, a pure fire year. The horse is the peak of summer from the ancient Chinese calendar. It's pure fire, and yang fire, you can't get more pure than that as well. So it's going to be a strong fire year. And then, of course, we've got to look at the countries that are ruled by this sign and how they'll be affected by the comet, right? So usually comets that are ruled by Sagittarius, countries that are ruled by Sagittarius will show, I think the countries will be most affected by this. And they are South Arabia, Australia, France, Hungary, Madagascar, Czech Republic, Slovenia, Spain, and Tuscany. So it'd be good to keep an eye on what's going to happen in these countries. I'm not saying it's all doom and gloom. I mean, I'm in Australia now, and I guess it's been since one of the last eclipses has been very dry. You can tell it's drought conditions, and I would say with the Yang Fire Horse year coming up, yeah, there can be, we're always prone to fires in this country, but it could potentially go to the next level next year. We'll see. And see what this energy is going to bring. But on a more positive note, right, I think I always look to the numerology or certain dates, right, of discoveries of things, because I think this is really important. And I always kind of pull it into the tarot, right? And I think probably one of the positive things about this is this card, this date adds up to the number 17, which is ruled by the star and the major arcana in the tarot. And this is connected obviously to the planet Uranus and Venus. And it's the card of hopes, wishes, wish fulfillment. You know, it's one of those cards we draw on. It falls after the tower, after those tower moments we have in life. Then it gives birth to the star that gives us hope and inspiration. You know, indicates a period of darkness coming out of a period of darkness and uncertainty. And one can have faith in the future and look towards brighter possibilities. And it also indicates healing and renewal and spiritual guidance. It's like the calm after the storm, right? So I found this interesting in connection with that. And then, of course, it breaks down even further, right? Because obviously 7 + 1 = strength, right? Which is the card 8 and the major arcana card. So this is connected to the planet Mars and the luminary, the sun, right? So it's associated with inner strength, courage, and power, and the ability to overcome obstacles, face fears, and rise to challenges, right? The strength card gives us great resilience in difficult signs, and particularly, obviously, this is just the general reading from the numerology, of course. It can play out in a number of ways, obviously, in tarot readings, but yeah, So I found that interesting that this date broke down to those numbers, and I think this is one way we can look at things, right? Because we may potentially go through a period of a strong underworld cycle coming up, because I know what's going on with the North Node about to ingress into Aquarius, and we're going to be in the bottom of the financial market. So things are going to get difficult, and they already are in Australia, right? I mean, it's ridiculous how expensive things are getting out there, right? But it also rules. The number 8 in numerology is one of the most active spiritual numbers, which is situated at the active end of the soul plane in numerology. So I look at this as it's a number of wisdom expressed intuitively through loving action. So I think whatever's going to play out through what we've experienced and witnessed from 3i Atlas since the discovery, hopefully in the kind of anti-knowledge, psychological and wisdom age we're in, hopefully these spiritual and esoteric and thirst for knowledge and wisdom is really going to start giving birth through the collective, just from the breakdown of what I've seen from the numerology here. So I just wanted to share that a little bit about comets, because there's been a lot of people talking about this in the astrology circles, and I just find it fascinating. But on the other side is, they have not been considered good omens in astrology. So anyway, guys, thanks for listening, and we'll come up with some other topics in the future. But yes, please join my Year of the Horse. You can DM me your date of birth if you don't want to write it into the comments, and we'll get right into that will be coming up. So strap yourselves in and stay tuned for that.